Many people in the modern world believe in God, but do not follow a religion. This idea can be attributed to Edward Herbert, a philosopher known as the father of English deism. Herbert thought that reason alone was sufficient to know God and the moral duties of humanity. In the eyes of Herbert, one could understand what was right and wrong through listening to our conscience, reasoning, and living virtuous lives. Herbert was born on March 3, 1583, in Shropshire. After receiving private tuition, Herbert graduated at the University of Oxford in May 1596 at the young age of 13. In 1599, at only 15 years old, he married his cousin, who was 21 years old at the time. Herbert was involved in the military, and his military career took him across Europe. Herbert experienced the 30 Years' War, and his experience made him skeptical towards religious dogma. The 30 Years' War was partially caused by tensions between Catholics and Protestants in Western Europe, with more than 4 million deaths by the end of the conflict. This inspired Herbert's search for a rational, natural religion that all reasonable people could accept. After all, why would Catholics and Protestants want to kill each other if there were common morals and virtues that applied to all human beings? Herbert's solution was to ground religious truth in innate, rational principles that were accessible to all humans. This was a shift from revelation to reason as the primary source of religious knowledge. However, Herbert maintained that reason and revelation don't need to conflict with each other when they are properly understood. While in Paris, Herbert found time to record his philosophical thoughts, completing his major philosophical work, De Veritate, in 1624. Herbert prayed to God for a sign whether he should publish the work or not, and he received a divine confirmation. According to his biography, he heard a gentle noise from heaven that brought him some comfort. For this reason, Herbert strongly believed in divine intervention and that God was actively involved in human lives. He thought that God answered prayers, performed miracles, and even provided assistance to men in times of stress. In De Veritate, Herbert identified 5 common religious beliefs. Herbert thought that these common notions were universal truths applied to all human minds. Herbert thought that regardless of where one was born in history, these principles were true and applied to all people. The 5 common notions were the following. 1. That there is a supreme deity or God. 2. That this deity ought to be worshipped. 3. That virtue is the chief part of worship. 4. That men should repent of their sins and turn away from them. And 5. That there is life after death with either rewards or punishment. Herbert thought that whatever contradicts these 5 points contradicts reason and therefore is false. Herbert thought that these ideas were true and that there was a universal religion that was accessible to all people through reason. At the same time, Herbert thought that particular doctrines, rituals, and hierarchies of religions and religious institutions were often corrupt. This is because their doctrines were contrary to the 5 common notions. Herbert was convinced that corruptions in religious organizations occurred when religious leaders introduced irrational practices or used religion for power and control. He was particularly critical of priests who had led people away from simple, rational worship. Herbert's ideas were further developed by prominent Enlightenment thinkers, including Thomas Hobbes, David Hume, and Rousseau. Deism also profoundly influenced several American founding fathers, including Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and James Madison. At the same time, Herbert's theory of innate ideas faced significant criticism. The most critical was John Locke in his essay Concerning Human Understanding. In Book 1 of the work, Locke devoted considerable attention to refuting Herbert's idea of nativism, the idea that some ideas are innate in the human mind. Locke criticized the idea that we have innate principles and the view that there are innate singular ideas. His main argument pointed out that none of the alleged innate mental content is universal and shared by all humans. This is because we have children, the mentally disabled, and many non-Europeans that supposedly lack the ideas that Herbert was talking about. Locke used evidence from travel literature to show that many groups deny what is understood to be innate and moral, and even some lack the idea of God. Perhaps John Locke thought that other cultural forces were influencing Herbert's ideas and that they were not sourced from universal reason. Herbert also contributed to the field of epistemology in philosophy. Epistemology refers to the methods by which human beings can know and understand the world. Herbert begins his epistemology with a rejection of 3 doctrines: skepticism, dogmatism, and fideism. Skepticism refers to the school of thought that questions the certainty of our own knowledge, arguing that we cannot be sure we know anything. Dogmatism refers to the idea of holding beliefs, which are often religious, political, or even philosophical, with unshakable certainty, asserting them as absolute truths without the possibility of change or adaptation. And lastly, there was fideism, the position that faith prioritizes over reason in the realm of religious truth. Herbert was critical of all of these doctrines because he viewed them as corrupting influences that led man to believe that we can know nothing and at the same time that we can know everything. In response, Herbert established a method for identifying truth through what he called right reason, or in the Latin, recta ratio. Herbert distinguished 4 stages of truth. The first one being the truth of the thing. This refers to the immediate objective reality of a particular item itself, and that exists independently of perception or conception. The second is the truth of appearance, which refers to how things present themselves to our senses. Thirdly, Herbert said that there is truth of concept. This means that our mind organizes and interprets appearances, forming ideas that represent the nature of things. And fourthly, Herbert stressed the truth of intellect. This is the highest stage for Herbert, where the intellect synthesizes various forms of truth, establishing conformity across different cultures and across different periods in history. Central to Herbert's epistemology is also his doctrine of faculties. In the eyes of Herbert, these are the ways that human beings can gain knowledge. Herbert organized these faculties into 4 groups, the first being natural instinct. Natural instinct refers to innate ideas that are implanted in all humans by God. Natural instinct represents the divine image most clearly present in human beings. Herbert described it as the process by which God communicates to the human mind. The second faculty that Herbert stressed was internal sense. The second type comprises the internal faculties. Internal senses concern active responses to particular objects, which may be spiritual, bodily, or anything that's external in the world. They can include love, hate, fear, and most importantly, the conscience. For Herbert, the conscience was the highest internal faculty because it was through the conscience that people can determine what is right and what is wrong. The third doctrine of faculties was the external senses, which is what we typically call the 5 senses in the world today. And the last faculty for Herbert was reasoning. We resort to reasoning when the other faculties fail. Reasoning takes aid from the other faculties, with those of instinct always serving as the final test of truth. Herbert's work anticipated important developments in epistemology, philosophy of religion, and also just religious studies. His recognition that different religions share common ethical and philosophical principles allowed for greater interfaith dialogue and also improved the academic study of religion. His attempt to ground religious belief in universal rational principles rather than focusing on particular revelations speaks to ongoing debates about religious diversity and also the relationship between faith and reason. Edward Herbert of Cherbury remains a fascinating figure whose life bridged the worlds of humanism, rationality, and also religious belief. He has had a substantial impact on religious philosophy, epistemology, and also Deism, securing himself as a key figure in the history of Western philosophy. But that brings us to the end of this video on Lord Herbert of Cherbury. I hope you found him interesting and his philosophy and of course his ideas. If you did, let me know in the comments section below. Make sure you like and subscribe for more content like this.